Hello, friends, and welcome back to r/ProRevenge. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. My worst customer. I work as a floral designer at a large craft store. I only work with silks as I don't have the proper tools or a cooler for live, and all my flowers are on the floor so customers can just buy stems or bushes. My workplace is a decently sized counter right in the middle of the store. Customers often think that my counter is a help desk, so I get a lot of people coming by. I had this woman and her daughter come up to my counter one day. I'll call her Bitchy Woman, BW, as I was making wreaths. Completely covered in flowers, wreath forms, and rolls of ribbon. This woman came up with armfuls of flowers and vases and just pushed my materials around to make room for her things. Immediately I was pissed, but I said the usual hello, and then if she needed help with anything. She didn't say anything, just looked up and glared at me and started playing with her vases. Taking her cue, I shut up and try to work around her, which is proving to be very difficult. I get customers fairly often who make up arrangements at my counter on their own, and usually they're pretty good. But this lady had no idea what she was doing. She chose these tall, thin vases and was trying to use flowers with very short stems, so the heads barely reached over the tops. I asked if she needed any help, and again her and her daughter glared at me. Fast forward 10 minutes. BW, are you just going to stand there? You're not even trying to help me? Me, completely bewildered. I'm sorry, but I asked you if you needed help, and you never told me what you needed help with. I'd be happy to... You're so disrespectful, I can't believe this. I'm sorry? I am a customer, and you're supposed to be helping me, not just standing there gawking. You're the rudest, most disrespectful girl I've ever met. I plan on reporting you and getting you fired. You don't deserve this job, you deserve to be fired. I don't remember everything she said, but it was a very long rant about how horrible I am. After all that, I started seeing red and just got up and walked off. She started yelling after me, so I kept walking. I went up to the register to hide and told one of the cashiers what happened. They told me to go hide in the back until she left. I came back out 20 minutes later, and thankfully she was gone. But most of my materials have been pushed onto the floor, and she had left all of her things there. I picked my things up and then put the things she left away. After I got back to work for about 15 minutes, I see her walk in again without her daughter. She starts looking around for the flowers she left behind and can't find them. Luckily, she didn't talk to me. I was so happy when she left without finding any of them. I never heard if she talked to my bosses, but I still have my job, so I'm not sure. And our second story. It's not 9 a.m. yet. I worked for a small startup for the first few years of my career. My boss, CEO, seemed to be still grasping object performance, as he had a hard time wrapping his head around people working when he could not physically see them doing so. But he was getting better over time. Business hours were 9 to 6, but all of our work could be done from home, and we had an office in Australia that some people communicated directly with, and tight release schedules sometimes meant long nights followed by late starts. So the informal policy tended to be as long as you were in the office by 10 and not leaving before 5, you didn't need to explain yourself, and anything beyond that was fine as long as you gave someone a heads up, especially if you were managed by the CEO who was too busy to pay close attention to people's exact arrivals and departures, and frequently away from the office himself speaking at various events. Enter our new VP, a 30-something milquetoast MBA type. Unlike the CEO, he was not too busy to pay attention to arrivals and departures, and told the CEO that obviously the lazy employees were taking advantage. The CEO, who again was sort of inclined this direction himself, sends out an email one Friday saying from this point forward, people need to be in the office every day by 9, and they needed permission from their manager to leave before 6. Everyone was pissed, but there was no real sense of long-term concern. This wasn't the first arbitrary rule that had been handed down in this fashion, and it tended to be easiest to play along with for a week or two until the CEO had moved on to the next thing, and then just ignore the rule. But the next Monday, when I showed up at 8:50, two of my coworkers were sitting on the stairs to the unoccupied next floor, just talking and playing Candy Crush. What are you doing? It's not 9 a.m. yet. I sat down with them, and soon someone else arrived and the same conversation played out. At 8:59, we all got up and walked into the office. On Tuesday, there were half a dozen people on the stairs, including leadership, chatting, texting, and whatever. And when the VP arrived, people would just make hard eye contact while he squirmed. Meanwhile, myself and a few other people just said screw it and arrived after 9 a.m. anyway, looking the VP straight in the eye as we walked in. A few people who were a little more conflict averse stopped for coffee across the street and just so happened to arrive at like 9:02, including people who normally preferred to start at 7 a.m. All of this meant that rather than being about half full, the office was virtually empty until 9 a.m. It also tended to clear out at exactly 6 p.m. Several people, including myself, simply stopped responding to anything outside work hours. On Tuesday morning, one of my favorite coworkers also made a show of announcing to her contacts in the Australia office that she could now only meet between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. their time. Calamity ensued. The funny thing is that we never really talked about it before or during. It just sort of happened naturally. The CEO, who'd been barely in the office on Monday and Tuesday, finally showed up on Wednesday, asked why everyone was outside, and we told him. He opened his mouth to protest that no, that wasn't what he meant, realized what was happening, and made a strategic retreat. The policy was formally retracted 2 days later, we never discussed it again, and it was the beginning of a very messy fall from grace for the VP. I find it so strange when people in charge get more concerned about clock hour employee work than, being able to complete tasks within adequate time. And our next story. Naked in a foreign country. My father was a commercial fisherman before I was born. He traveled the world, originally from Canada, and worked away for months at a time. As an aside, one time while fishing, a Soviet sub surfaced behind them, and it was one of the most frightening experiences of a lifetime for a fearless man. Anyway, the boat and its crew were fishing off the coast of Africa, and every time they went out to their spot and were about to drop the nets, the engine would conk out. After the second time, they hit a crew member in the engine room and found out the second in command was sabotaging the engine. From what I remember, the time for fishing was short, and there was a pretty heavy level of competition and a lot at stake. The saboteur was being paid by a rival fishing vessel so they could get the advantage. So this may not sound like it, but it was a pretty big deal. These people had a short amount of time to make a lot of money, and the whole crew was away from their families for long stretches. So what to do with this traitor? There was talk of throwing him overboard, but no one wanted to be brought up on charges. Beating him was not really a punishment, so they came up with this. They took his ID, took all his money, stripped him naked, and left him on a beach in Africa. Update. Well, my dad's passed away now, so I have only the details that he told me a long time ago. The aftermath is up in the air. I'm pretty sure the saboteur was from Canada or the US. I don't know how he could have made it back without any ID or anything. That being said, the world has a way of looking after you. So some people probably gave him some clothes, and then he probably could have made it to a consulate and maybe got a bunch of people to verify who he was via phone, but I'm just speculating. My dad said no one from the fishing crew ever heard from him again, but I doubt they'd be in touch anyway, so that really doesn't mean anything. As for the Soviet sub, the time frame for all this was probably late 60s, early 70s. The sub just came up fairly close right behind them, then observed the ship for about 5 minutes, then submerged again. To some, it may not sound that scary, but my father said it was unreal, and he was genuinely freaked out. They had no idea the sub's intentions. They were scared for about 20 minutes, after which they guessed that if something was going to happen, it would have happened. Off topic, but he did work for a McDonald's supplier at one point, and they fished for the boat that they used for fillet of fish. And he said, never, never, never eat a fillet of fish. And our last story, in which two fighting neighbors behave like little children. Neighbors are tripping. I have these two neighbors 2 houses down from me that do not get along. One of them, let's call him mayor of the block, thinks that he's, the mayor of our block. He constantly calls the cops on people for minor stuff like taking the trash to the curb too early. Yeah, I didn't know that was a thing either until one of my neighbors warned me about it. Or too many people living in a house. I'm on good terms with the mayor of the block as I don't want any drama. I just like watching it. Well, his next door neighbor, let's call him Joe, will not stand for it. He gets so upset because mayor of the block has called the cops on him almost on a weekly basis. The police know mayor of the block is nuts and take his complaints with a grain of salt when they come out for their obligatory response. Joe has gotten so fed up with it that he started to mess with the mayor of the block. First, it was small stuff like purposefully leaving the grass that borders each other's property uncut. He cuts his entire lawn but leaves a hilarious strip of what's now higher than 6 inches of grass between their properties. We live in the suburbs outside of a major city, and the lot sizes are super small. It's enough where mayor of the block sees it every time he walks out his front door. Mayor of the block called the cops on Joe again, so this time Joe started to collect bottles from around the block and keep them just on the border of his property and mayor of the block's. He collected them for weeks before he went and cashed in. Mayor of the block called cops again on Joe for God knows what reason. It was this time that I was brought in unintentionally as an accomplice. We were renovating our bathroom and we were throwing out our old circa 1970s yellow toilet. Joe asked if he can take it. We said of course, as it'll save us the trouble of getting rid of it. That ugly yellow toilet is now on the border of his property facing mayor of the block's. He's now started to make it into a planter with hideous garden gnomes surrounding it. I can't help but laugh every time I pass it on the way home. That's freaking hilarious. I hope he forms a gnome army to ward off the evil mayor. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one.